Holt Barrington tapped my proposal with one manicured finger and pushed it back toward me like it carried disease. The sound of paper sliding across glass made my stomach drop. "Cute," he said, smirking. "But you're not operating in leagues you can afford." The executives around the glass tables shifted in their leather chairs. Someone coughed. My sister Talia crossed her legs slowly, a smile playing at her lips. She was enjoying this. Every second of my humiliation fed something dark inside her. My throat burned as I gathered my colour-coded charts with trembling fingers. I'd spent weeks on these, weeks of late nights and careful calculations, all for nothing. Holt leaned closer, his expensive cologne overwhelming. His voice dropped low enough that only I could hear. "I only sat through this because I married your sister. Consider the courtesy repaid." Laughter rippled around the table. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never return. But I didn't. Because Holt Barrington had no idea who he was really talking to. And that mistake would cost him everything. My name is Maren Caldwell, and I'm 28 years old. That day, Holt publicly destroyed me in a conference room inside a company that survived entirely on loans from my bank. But he didn't know I was the silent majority shareholder of that bank. Nobody knew. I kept it quiet, just like my grandmother taught me. She believed power should whisper, not shout. She believed loud men always underestimate quiet women. She was right. As I stood there gathering my scattered papers, I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table or break down crying. I didn't give Holt or Talia the satisfaction. I simply looked him dead in the eyes and smiled. A small smile, calm, almost sweet. Because in that moment, everything became crystal clear. Holt had just handed me the cleanest, most legal path to his complete downfall. He'd humiliated me in front of witnesses. He'd shown his true character. And he had no idea that I held the power to review every single loan his companies depended on. He thought he'd won. But the game had just begun. 6 months earlier, my life was completely different. I was a mid-level manager at Riverside Financial, a community bank I'd worked at since graduating college. Nothing fancy. I reviewed loan applications, attended boring meetings, and went home to my small apartment every night. Nobody at work knew my secret. When my grandmother passed away the previous winter, she left me something incredible in her will. 51% of Riverside Financial's stock. The result of decades of quiet, careful investing that nobody in our family even knew about. Her lawyer handed me the documents in his wood-panelled office. I stared at the numbers, unable to process them. "Your grandmother was very specific," he said. "She wanted you to have control, not your sister, you." At her funeral, she'd whispered her final words to me while everyone else stood outside. Her hand was cold in mine. "Power is quiet, Maren. Let loud men underestimate you. They always hand you the win." I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would. The Barrington family dinner happened 2 months before the pitch. Talia had insisted I come to their new house. Their mansion, really. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, everything gleaming and cold. Holt held court at the head of the table like a king. He talked about his deals, his properties, his vision for expansion. Talia kept touching his arm, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. When my father asked about my new project idea, excitement lit up inside me. Finally, someone wanted to hear about my work. But Holt cut in before I could answer. "She has passion," he said, waving his wine glass. "But business requires more than passion. It requires experience, strategy, money." Everyone laughed. Even my mother smiled. Talia giggled into her napkin. I swallowed hard, my face burning. "You should pitch it," Holt continued. "Come to my office. Practice on my team. It'll be good experience for you." Talia squeezed his hand. "That's so generous, honey." I should have seen it then, the trap being set, but I was too desperate to prove myself. Too naive. I prepared for 3 weeks straight. My boss, Leo, helped me refine the presentation. He was an older man with kind eyes who'd mentored me since I started at Riverside. "This is airtight," he said, reviewing my final draft. "You're more than ready." I practiced in front of my mirror every morning. I memorized every number, every projection. I bought a new suit I couldn't really afford. This was my chance to show everyone I was more than just Talia's little sister. The morning of the pitch, I woke up early, nerves buzzing through my body. I was brushing my teeth when I saw Talia's phone light up on my bathroom counter. She'd left it there the night before when she'd stopped by. The preview showed a text to Holt. "She's so excited it's pathetic." My stomach dropped, ice flooded my veins. But I'd come too far to back down now. I finished getting ready and drove to Holt's office building, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. I had too much to lose to quit, even if I was walking into a trap. For the first 20 minutes, I thought it was going well. The conference room was silent, except for my voice. I presented my market research, my financial projections, my 5-year plan. Everything was organized and clear. Holt sat at the far end of the table, hands steepled under his chin. He nodded occasionally, looked thoughtful, professional. Talia sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. I felt good, confident, like maybe I'd been wrong about that text message. Then I reached the funding section. And that's why I'm seeking a $200,000 loan to... Holt leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked. He smirked. "Wait, you want a loan? From us? From me?" He laughed. "Maren, you can barely afford your apartment." The executives around the table chuckled. One woman looked down at her notepad. The mood shifted instantly. My cheeks burned. My carefully prepared words dried up in my throat. "I thought..." "Cute pitch, though," Holt interrupted. "Really, but stick to what you know." Something inside me cracked. I gathered my materials with shaking hands. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked at me. The silence was worse than the laughter. I walked out of that conference room with my head up, but inside I was dying. The elevator took forever. When the doors finally closed, I pressed myself against the wall and tried to breathe. Outside, the October wind cut through my new suit. I stood on the sidewalk, trying to remember where I'd parked. "Maren!" Talia's heels clicked on the pavement behind me. She caught up, slightly out of breath. "Hey, don't feel bad," she said sweetly. "Holt's just being honest. Maybe stick to your little bank job, okay? Not everyone is meant to be a leader." She said it like she cared, like she was giving me advice. But I heard the poison underneath, the satisfaction. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust my voice. The elevator dinged behind us. Talia went back inside. When the doors closed, I finally let myself smile. Not from joy. From clarity. Something had crystallized inside me. Back at Riverside Financial, I sat in my office with the door closed. My hands had stopped shaking. My mind was calm, clear. I opened our database and searched for Holt Barrington's companies. 8 active loans, multiple credit lines, all under the Barrington Holdings umbrella, all backed by personal guarantees from Holt himself. I studied the repayment schedules, the covenant requirements, the terms and conditions he'd agreed to. He wasn't untouchable. He was leveraged, overextended, walking a tightrope he probably didn't even notice anymore. If he missed even one covenant requirement, bank policy required an immediate compliance review. If the review found issues, we could recall the loans, demand immediate repayment. My grandmother's shares made me the only person with authority to initiate such a review without board approval. I closed my laptop and stared out my window at the parking lot below. Holt had humiliated me publicly, thinking I was powerless. But he'd made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated the quiet girl from the little bank. I didn't push any buttons myself. That would have been obvious, suspicious. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice through proper channels. On Monday morning, I walked into Leo's office with a calm expression. "I'd like to request a routine review of Barrington Holdings," I said. "All their accounts." Leo looked up from his coffee, his eyebrows raised slightly. "Any particular reason?" "Due diligence," I said smoothly. "They're one of our largest borrowers. We should verify everything is in order." It wasn't a lie. It was smart banking, responsible oversight. Leo studied my face for a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll assign it to the risk team today." "Thank you." I left his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Everything I was doing was legal, ethical, required even. But I knew what our risk team would find. Because men like Holt, it always cut corners. They always believe rules don't apply to them. And that arrogance always leaves a trail. The risk team worked quickly. Within a week, their preliminary report landed on my desk. I read it twice, my heart pounding. Holt had violated 3 covenant requirements: late financial disclosures, debt-to-income ratio creeping above acceptable levels, cash flow irregularities that suggested poor management. Small cracks, easy to overlook if nobody was looking. But we were looking now. I thanked the risk team calmly, my voice steady. Inside, electricity buzzed through my veins. Holt had humiliated me in that conference room, thinking he was untouchable, thinking his money and connections made him bulletproof. But he'd humiliated himself financially months before he ever humiliated me personally. He just didn't know it yet. I forwarded the report to Leo with a simple note. Recommend full compliance audit per policy section 12B. Then I closed my laptop and went home. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Quiet power, Grandma, just like you taught me. 2 weeks later, Talia invited me to brunch. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at an expensive cafe downtown. White tablecloths, fresh flowers. Talia wore sunglasses inside. The moment I sat down, she leaned forward. "So Holt felt bad about the pitch," she said, stirring her latte. "But he wanted me to tell you something. You should be grateful for the exposure. Most people don't get that kind of feedback from someone at his level." I stared at her, just stared. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't comforting me. She was savoring it, twisting the knife. "Do you even like me?" I asked quietly. Talia blinked. For a second, she looked genuinely surprised. Then she forced a laugh. "Oh my God, don't be so dramatic. We're sisters." But she didn't answer the question. That told me everything. I finished my coffee in silence. When I left, Talia was still sitting there scrolling through her phone. She had no idea her perfect life was already crumbling. The next executive meeting at Riverside Financial was routine until we reached loan portfolio review. One director frowned at his tablet. "Why are the Barrington numbers deteriorating?" "Colt," another board member flipped through papers. "Didn't we just extend them another line last year?" "We did," Leo confirmed. "But their financials have shifted. Risk flagged several concerns." I sat quietly at the table, hands folded, expression neutral. I didn't volunteer information, didn't defend or attack. Just listened. "Barrington overextended again," someone muttered. "Appears so." The board agreed to proceed with a full compliance audit. Standard procedure for borrowers showing warning signs. Completely legal, completely justified. When the meeting ended, Leo caught my eye across the room. He gave me a small nod. He knew. Not everything, but enough. My grandmother would have been proud. This was what she meant. Quiet power, letting systems work properly instead of forcing them. Watching dominoes fall naturally instead of knocking them down myself. Holt called my boss the next day. Leo told me about it afterward in his office. "Barrington wants to know why we're reviewing him," Leo said, leaning against his desk. He sounded angry. I kept my voice steady. "What did you tell him?" "That every major borrower undergoes annual compliance reviews, that this year is his turn." "Perfect." Leo studied me carefully. "Maren, are you okay?" "I'm great," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my adult life, I felt powerful, not because I was hurting someone, but because I was standing up for myself using the legitimate tools available to me. Holt thought he could humiliate people without consequences. He thought his charm and money made him immune. He was wrong. And now he was beginning to realize it. I left Leo's office with my head high. Down the hall, I caught my reflection in a window. I looked different somehow, stronger. The scared girl from that conference room was gone. The risk team dug deeper over the following month. What they found made my blood run cold. Holt had been using short-term credit lines to fund long-term investments. Classic financial mismanagement. He was juggling debt, moving money between accounts to hide the true state of his cash flow. It was the kind of mistake made by people who believe they're too smart to fail, too important to be questioned. The kind of arrogance that destroys empires. The board met again. This time they approved a formal compliance check. Professional auditors would review every Barrington account, every transaction, every contract. A routine procedure, fully legal, completely justified given the red flags. But for Holt, it would be devastating. Because when you've been cutting corners for years, a proper audit is your worst nightmare. I sat in that meeting taking notes like always, my face calm. Inside, I was counting down the days until Holt's house of cards collapsed. He still had no idea I was behind any of it. I was at a family friend's birthday party when Holt cornered me. I'd been avoiding him and Talia, staying near the food table. But he found me anyway. "You think you're smart?" he hissed, stepping close. His breath smelled like whiskey. "You and your bank. Poking around my companies." I took a sip of water, keeping my hand steady. "We review all major borrowers, Holt. It's policy." "You're lying." "I don't need to lie." His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. His face was red. Veins stood out on his forehead. "You're doing this because I rejected your pathetic pitch." "No," I said calmly, "I'm doing my job. If your finances are in order, you have nothing to worry about." He leaned closer. "You're going to regret this." "Am I?" Across the room, Talia watched us. Her face was pale, worried. She was starting to understand that something was very wrong. But it was already too late to stop it. The audit uncovered something worse than anyone expected. Holt had been chronically overvaluing his assets. Properties listed at prices they'd never actually sell for. Inventory valued at retail when it would only move at discount. The kind of inflation that makes balance sheets look healthy, while reality tells a different story. The board called an emergency meeting. I sat in my usual seat, heart pounding but face calm. "We need to suspend further loan disbursements," one director said, "until Barrington provides corrected valuations." Another nodded. "We can't extend additional credit based on false numbers." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, Holt's companies ground to a halt. Suppliers demanded payment he couldn't make. Projects stalled. Partners started asking questions. My phone buzzed. A text from Talia. "What's happening? Holt is losing his mind." I didn't respond. This wasn't personal anymore. It was business. Proper business. Conducted by the rules Holt had always thought were beneath him. And those rules were crushing him. Talia showed up at my apartment on a Thursday evening. No warning. Just frantic knocking. I opened the door. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes red. "Something's wrong with Holt's businesses," she said, voice shaking. "Everything's falling apart. Did you tell your bank to target him?" She looked desperate, scared. For once in her life, she wasn't the perfect sister with the perfect husband and perfect life. "No," I said simply. "We follow policy. We review all major borrowers." "But why now? Why him?" "Because his finances warranted it." Talia covered her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't understand what's happening. He said everything was fine. He promised me we were building something permanent." For the first time in years, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness, but clarity. Holt lied to you, I said quietly, just like he lied to the bank. She stared at me, broken. I closed the door gently. The final stage of the audit revealed the catastrophic truth. Holt had leveraged personal property without proper documentation. His lake house, his boat, even jewellery he'd bought Talia. All used as collateral for loans, but the paperwork was incomplete, sometimes missing entirely. A massive breach of banking regulations, the kind that destroys credibility permanently. The board called an emergency session for Friday afternoon. Every director attended. The room was tense. I arrived early and took my seat at the table, not my usual seat, the seat at the head of the table where board chairs sit. Because it was time. Time for everyone to understand who'd really been in charge all along. When Holt stormed into the bank 30 minutes later, demanding to see whoever the hell is ruining my life, security escorted him directly to the boardroom. He burst through the door, face red, suit dishevelled. Then he froze. Because I was sitting there, at the head of the polished table, surrounded by bank directors. Maron? His voice was small, confused. I inclined my head slightly, my hands folded on the table. Hello, Holt. What are you... Why are you... He looked around wildly. What is this? Leo spoke from his seat. Maron is our majority shareholder. She chairs compliance review sessions of this magnitude. The colour drained from Holt's face. He actually stumbled backward. You, he whispered. You own the bank? 51%, I confirmed calmly. Inherited from my grandmother. I've been quite involved in oversight for months now. Silence filled the room. Pure, perfect silence. Holt's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. All his arrogance, all his confidence, all his condescension, it all crumbled in that moment. He finally understood. The quiet girl he'd humiliated in his conference room owned the institution his entire empire depended on. Please sit, I said, gesturing to a chair across from me. He sat like a puppet with cut strings. We need to discuss your accounts. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I didn't let emotion touch my voice. I simply opened the audit report and began reading the findings aloud. Multiple covenant breaches, misrepresentation of asset liquidity, chronic overvaluation of properties, repeated late disclosures, use of undocumented collateral. Holt's hands shook on the table. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. These violations require immediate action per our standard policies, I continued. Maron, please, he said, voice cracking. I can fix this. I can provide better documentation. I can... You had months to maintain proper records, Holt. I looked him straight in the eye. These decisions are based solely on compliance requirements and risk management. Nothing personal. But we both knew that was only partly true. Yes, everything I'd done was legal and justified. Yes, any competent bank would have taken the same actions given these findings. But I'd been the one to initiate the review. I'd been the one watching carefully. And Holt knew it. His arrogance had finally broken. The board voted 20 minutes later. I abstained, letting the other directors decide. It was unanimous anyway. Freeze all new funding, initiate collateral review, demand corrective action within 30 days or begin recall procedures. A legal response, an ethical response, a response any responsible financial institution would make. But for Holt, it was fatal. He couldn't meet the requirements. His companies were too over-leveraged, his documentation too poor, his financial management too reckless. He slumped in his chair, staring at the table like it might somehow save him. It didn't. This meeting is adjourned, I said quietly. The directors filed out. Holt sat frozen. I gathered my papers and stood. As I passed him, I paused. You told me I wasn't operating in leagues I could afford, I said softly. Turns out you were right. My league was always higher than yours. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard him start to cry. Over the next month, Holt's empire collapsed in slow motion. Without bank funding, his project stalled completely. Partners withdrew. Investors panicked and pulled out. He tried securing emergency funding from other banks, but with covenant breaches on his record and Riverside's concerns documented, nobody would touch him. Banks talked to each other. Word spreads fast. One by one, his companies shut down. His employees lost jobs, his properties went up for sale. The mansion where Talia had hosted that dinner, the office building where he'd humiliated me, the lake house he'd loved. All of it. Talia stopped posting photos on social media. Their social circle quietly distanced themselves. I watched from my office window as the empire crumbled, feeling nothing but calm certainty. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Holt had built everything on arrogance and lies. When someone finally checked his work, it collapsed under its own weight. I'd just been the one brave enough to look. Talia called me late one night. I almost didn't answer. "Can we meet?" she asked, voice small. We met at a quiet coffee shop. She looked exhausted. Older somehow. "He said he'd protect me," Talia whispered, staring at her untouched coffee. "He said we were building an empire. Something permanent." I said nothing. "You tried to warn me about him at the engagement party. Remember? You said he seemed too perfect, too smooth." Her voice broke. "And I laughed at you." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything. For the brunch, for that text message, for letting him humiliate you." Tears rolled down her face. "I was jealous. You were always so smart and capable. I hated that about you." For the first time in our lives, Talia was being honest with me. "I know," I said quietly. We sat in silence for a long time. When we left, she hugged me. I hugged her back. Forgiveness would take time, but understanding had finally begun. 3 months after the board vote, Riverside Financial's directors requested a meeting with me. I walked into the conference room, the same one where this had all started, with no idea what to expect. "We'd like you to step into a more active leadership role," Leo said. "Interim executive chair. We need someone with integrity. Someone who understands both the business and the ethics." I stared at them. "Me?" "Your handling of the Barrington situation was exemplary," another director said. "Firm but fair. Thorough but appropriate. That's the leadership we need." 2 weeks later, my nameplate was placed on the polished desk in the executive office. I ran my fingers over the engraved letters of my name. In my mind, I heard my grandmother's voice again. "Power is quiet, Maren." I finally understood what she'd been trying to teach me. Power isn't about shouting or dominating. It's about competence, integrity, using the tools available to you properly and ethically once. It's about letting loud men underestimate you and then showing them they were wrong. 6 months later, I was leaving the office when I passed Holt in the lobby. He was meeting with one of our loan officers about restructuring his remaining debt. He looked different, older, quieter. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by something ordinary. He saw me and froze. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he nodded. Small, respectful. I nodded back. I didn't stop to talk. I didn't need to. Everything that happened to him came from his own choices, his arrogance, his recklessness, his belief that rules didn't apply to him. The humiliation in his conference room had just been the moment I decided to stop ignoring what I could see in the numbers. I walked into the parking lot, December wind cool on my face, feeling weightless. Not triumphant, not vengeful. Just free. Free from trying to prove myself to people who would never value me. Free from accepting treatment I didn't deserve. I unlocked my car and sat inside for a moment, watching people come and go. Never underestimate the quiet ones, I thought. Especially the ones holding the real power